I'm delighted right now to welcome to the studio another party leader, the new leader of UKIP. His name is Henry Bolton, and I have to be honest with you, Henry, it's delightful to meet you, but not exactly a household name just yet, compared with some other previous UKIP leaders we could possibly mention. Do you intend to become a household name?
Indeed. Nigel the other day was saying that he wasn't a household name at one point. Nobody knew him. Things change, and when you're a national party leader, then your name becomes known.
Well,
so
I mean,
you'll hear more of me.
As you
that's
say,
for sure.
Things do change. You replaced Paul Nuttall, who was the fourth UKIP leader in just 18 months. Now,
Yeah.
You went from doing incredibly well in the European elections a few years back. 2015 general election, UKIP was the third biggest party by vote share, 12.6%, beating Lib Dems into fourth place. A few months ago in June, you only managed 600,000 votes, went down to 1.8%. Is there any purpose? Is there any point to UKIP anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, looking at those figures, there are two main reasons why the vote went down. One is that we didn't contest around half of the seats, which was a tactical error. And the second is that a lot of the people in the country, including some UKIP supporters, felt that Theresa May would actually deliver on her promise to take us out of the European Union.
Yeah, something like 46%, I think, of UKIP voters voted Conservative instead.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I couldn't give you the exact figure, but a significant number did. And now we see the can being kicked down the road. We see the increasing talk of a transition, which is open-ended. Around 2 years is not indicative of clear planning, in my view. And we just don't know where we're going with this, except we're, at the moment, only leaving in name. So we're already seeing significant people renewing their membership with UKIP. I'm getting emails already since I was elected saying, well, now that you've been elected, I'm going to rejoin the party. So I think you're seeing, and a lot of people saying, I'm very sorry, I voted Conservative in the last election. It was a terrible mistake. I will never vote Tory again.
Well, the Conservatives said that the election was entirely about Brexit, to get that mandate to negotiate a deal. But you're saying that there's still a role for UKIP because, what are you? Are you sort of the backup plan?
Well, I think we are the pro-Brexit opposition, if you like. All of the political pressure on a weak government at the moment is to compromise in terms of leaving the European Union. And we need a strong voice in this country that is going to say, well, that's all well and good, but look at the other side of it, to counterbalance that voice for compromise. And indeed, in many cases, for the Liberal Democrats, for example, they quite clearly do not want us to leave the European Union. The voice of 17.4 million people needs to be represented clearly. And we're the only party that is absolutely committed to leaving the European Union.
So the UKIP, as far as you're concerned, do still have a role. Now, you mentioned
Absolutely.
the Liberal Democrats. We're going to get back to more about the Brexit deal and other policies. But the Liberal Democrats, of course, were once the party of which you were a member. Indeed,
That's
you
right.
stood as a candidate back in 2005 as a Liberal Democrat. That is it's quite a political journey from Liberal Democrats to leader of UKIP. How did you make that journey?
Well, I joined the Liberal Democrats because I was mandated by the UN to help some political parties in Kosovo to develop their internal governance. And at that time, I knew nothing about how a political party works. And I wasn't going to join the Conservatives or Labour, so I went down the middle.
Let's give a little bit of your history. I mean, you're a former police officer. You had an award for bravery. You're a former army officer. You worked for the EU of all organisations for a UKIP leader as a strategist on common defence and security policy. You got an OBE for your services to international security for work in the former Yugoslavia. In terms of a background for somebody to become leader of UKIP, add that to the Liberal Democrat candidacy. That is an extraordinary range of experiences that perhaps we wouldn't expect.
Correct. And actually, what a toolkit for doing the job. Foreign affairs, international relations, security, borders. I know the European Union inside out. I still lecture for the Austrian Defence Academy on crisis management procedures and planning inside the European Union. I know Whitehall inside out. I know, so I've got a tremendous toolkit to do this job. And that's why I put myself up for it.
Pretty much everyone who goes to work for the European Union, I think probably except you and Boris Johnson, when he was working as a Telegraph Brussels correspondent many, many years ago, they seem to, for want of a better phrase, go native and start becoming avid supporters of the EU. Why didn't you? Why did it turn you against the EU?
I've never been one for following the crowd. I spent 3 years in Brussels, and I had particular responsibility for North Africa and Ukraine. And I was frankly appalled at the lack of interest in the hierarchy in Brussels at actually having an effect on the ground. Lots and lots of interest in establishing a blue flag with yellow stars all over it, and lots of interest in going around and glad-handing everybody, but actually...
And spending lots of money.
And spending lots of our money, and actually having not interested in having an effect. I mean, the thing is, if you set out to have an effect and you don't quite achieve that effect, you fail, is how they see it. So that's a political risk, and they are entirely risk averse in that sense. So they don't want to actually work on anything that's going to deliver practical results. For example, the migrant situation across the Mediterranean. There is a lot that could be done by the European Union on that, but they don't want to do it because they might fall short of what they set out to do, and therefore it's all window
so
dressing.
You just see the EU as a failed sort of monolith?
I do, yeah, and it feeds itself. Brussels is you used the word earlier, bubble, and it is. Brussels is a bubble, and it's a great life. Lots of people thoroughly enjoy earning a lot of money.
Fabulous restaurants, everyone eats in on expenses. I had a wonderful weekend there once.
Absolutely, and they don't parachute themselves into the deserts of the Sahel or Helmand, or they live a quite comfortable life, and they're very happy to keep it that way.
In terms of, what you think is going to happen in terms of Brexit, Theresa May has just been on the stage saying to EU citizens living here in the UK, and there are an awful lot of them, you are welcome and we want you to stay. Is that a policy announcement you would echo?
There's no caveat to that, is there? There's no restrictions to that. It's been said by Theresa May and by Amber Rudd that we will put an end to the freedom of movement by requiring EU citizens who wish to live here to register. Well, we've just been.
But that would be new arrivals.
Yeah, right. But that's not ending the freedom of movement. That's just bluff, or not bluff. It's just misleading people.
Just paperwork.
Because as a Brit, when I was in Brussels, I had to register. When I was in Vienna, working in Vienna, I had to register. If you're a Brit and you're living abroad in the European Union, you have to register. It's nothing to do with the freedom of movement thing. So to say that or imply, because it's not actually been stated, that by registering EU citizens who wish to live here, we are restricting the freedom of movement is tosh.
Do you believe then that this Conservative government led by Theresa May, in terms of what they are planning in terms of immigration, in terms of Brexit, is it a con compared to what people thought they were voting for back in June 2016 in the EU referendum?
I think you used the word, what they're planning. I don't think they're planning very much. The position papers that the British government has put forward to Brussels are not negotiating position papers. They are they're rather like ministerial policy briefs. They're not the basis for negotiation. There's nothing concrete in them whatsoever. I couldn't negotiate on that, and I've negotiated on behalf of the European Union with other countries, not the UK, obviously. And you can't negotiate on the basis of one of those policy papers. It's just a vague series of intents. So there's nothing there. I don't believe that there's any planning or preparation going forward. I don't think the government knows what to do in that respect. There is no planning for what we do when we leave the customs union. So, what happens on our borders the day we leave the customs union? There's a whole lot of stuff that needs to be in place, and none of it has been planned yet. So, my own opinion is that's why they're talking about a transition period, which for me is unacceptable.
Just delaying the inevitable.
Well, they don't know what to do, and so they're kicking it down the road.
Well, we'll talk more about what you actually want from that. We'll talk about your plans for your immigration policy for UKIP, and what the new UKIP party stands for. We'll talk about that more coming up after an update on the travel. We'll keep you up to date on everything Theresa May is saying in Manchester as well. This is Talk Radio. Stay tuned. We're talking to another party leader, the new leader of UKIP. His name is Henry Bolton. He was elected last Friday. He beat out a candidate who came second but had been a front runner called Anne-Marie Waters. And you had warned, Henry, had you not, that if she had been elected, that your party would have become the UK Nazi party under her, because of some of her views on issues like immigration. Well, let's talk not about Anne-Marie Waters. She is, I suppose, history, but about your party's policy on immigration. It was such a huge issue at the Brexit referendum, such a huge issue for Nigel Farage and his leadership of UKIP. What is the UKIP immigration policy?
Well, at the moment it's about bringing it down and placing a cap on it. But I'm in a slightly different space on that. What we need to do is bring it down to as close to zero net immigration as we can until we're on top of it.
So when you say zero net immigration, that will still mean a few 100,000 people coming into the country.
Well, it's very difficult to say
not?
Absolutely. Yes, it's zero. I mean, would be the balance point. There's as many people coming in as are leaving. Now, the problem we've got at the moment is so many of our public services are being cut, policing by 25%, some local government by 50% or so. So the pressure on our infrastructure and our services is increasing anyway because of those cuts. Add to that the population the size of Wolverhampton or Hull every year, which is what we've got, then it's actually we're rapidly getting to breaking point, and it's putting a lot of people and a lot of communities under a lot of stress. So what we need to do is bring it back to a net of around zero. It's going to be impossible to actually hit zero. Sometimes it might be above or below, and until such time, or work to bring it down until such time as we're on top of it and that we can manage it properly. Part of it's about integration, part of an assimilation of immigrant communities into the UK. Part of it's about making sure that we've got the right housing, the right education, the right healthcare facilities and so on, all in place.
Well, you've talked about the threats, particularly of the problems with assimilation of one particular culture, one particular religion, the threat from Islam. You have spoken about how British people feel their culture, their traditions, their way of life is, in your words, being buried and pushed aside by Islam. And you say also the weight of immigration. In what way is British culture and our traditions being buried by Islam?
Not overall, but in certain communities. Then the indigenous English Anglo-Saxon population is nowhere to be seen almost, and
you're talking about ghettos.
I wouldn't put it as ghettos, but I would put it that we've got entire communities, entire areas of towns where there are almost no, if you like, Anglo-Saxon British people. They're new arrivals over the last 10, 20 years and are entirely dominant in that area. We've got
why is that? Why is it a problem if people are? You're talking about Anglo-Saxons. I think you mean white Brits, native Brits. But, there are plenty of black and Asian people born in this country as British as you and I. Why is it a problem if people of a particular religion or people of a particular background or skin colour live in particular neighbourhoods? Why is that an issue for you?
The difficulty is that a lot of them come from rural areas and at the moment, we've had a large influx of people from areas of Iraq and Afghanistan, Syria, Africa, they're rural populations. The level of literacy is quite low. The level of qualifications are quite low, and so the result is we end up with areas in which we've got a problem with employment, we've got a problem with poverty, we've got a problem with understanding how the UK society works, and we end up with a community that's establishing, if you like, a community within a community. And this is what I was trying to put across, that this is. I'll come back to the multiculturalism in a moment, if I may, but in a multicultural Britain, well, British culture should be a strong part of that. That's the underlying basis of who we are as a nation and why, in many ways, that people want to come here. But we're in some areas smothering that with a poorly managed immigration process where we end up with large areas, large geographical areas that are dominantly non-British.
Well, we're told, aren't we, there's all this assimilation and melting pots, but again, even in London, where we are right now, a city I know better than most other cities in this country, that actually you've got areas which are Bangladeshi, Afro-Caribbean, Turkish, Pakistani, Indian, white, and we have very, very, very different. There's very little integration. What can we do to make sure that people do integrate? Because British people who go to Spain don't integrate. A lot of them don't even bother learning the Spanish language. Is that any different?
No, I think if you go to Austria and you say to somebody, "What do you mean by culture?" And they'll say theatre, the arts, cuisine, this sort of thing, dance. Here, we a lot of people would say, well, it's about how people live. And what we multiculturalism, you find, but where's the British identity in this? And people who come to live here, if you're, I don't know, Bosnian and you go and live in Austria, you are then, you become, there's a large Bosnian population in Vienna, and they see themselves, yes, they're Bosnian roots, but they are Austrian, and they're proud of that, and they do try to assimilate to a great degree. Here we've got a different construct where multiculturalism means that actually we are a patchwork of different cultures, different societies.
Bring your value and cultures and come and live here.
Correct. So, and where is that overall identity to being British? Now, when we put it in the context of Brexit, who are we, the British, when we say that we want to project ourselves globally in trade? What is our brand? Is it a multiple brand? Or is it something that we can all identify
So does it have anything to do with skin colour or anything to do with a country of origin or anything to do with someone's religion? Or for you, is it about how someone lives their life?
It's about how we identify with each other. We are...
Is this are we in Norman Tebbit cricket test territory? Then? No, is that what it is? Though?
I mean, no, we if we're British, anybody who carries a British passport should have a fairly common understanding of what it means to be British, and I think
should speak English.
And should speak English, and
I think most people would agree on that.
Absolutely, and this is really what I'm saying, and that's not the case at the moment. People can come here, they get a British passport, and they set themselves up in their own community, and they live as though they are in a town in northern Syria. And that's a slight. I'm being a bit simplistic there, but that's the effect. So where is the British identity? And I think it would be useful in the Brexit context for us to have a sort of national reflection that what does it mean to be British in the modern world?
Do you worry that these things quickly get interpreted as being about race and about xenophobia and about what this phrase, it's a made-up word really, but Islamophobia, but you know what I mean by that?
I think it's unhelpful. I mean, we have a particular...
But your party, I mean, given the history of your party, there have been a number of people, and we know from some of the things that Anne-Marie Waters said, I mean, she was a rival candidate, came second place. There seems to be a lot more support in your party for some views which a lot of us would find unpleasant.
Well, yes, and it's certainly not helpful. I mean, the party voted for myself as leader, and in doing so, they voted for a broad suite of policies. Security is in there, immigration is in there, and these are two things that in some areas come together. So we've got the jihadist terrorist threat. And obviously that's a security risk associated with a religion. It's not that those things are not important or don't need to be addressed. What it is that we've got to have a broad suite of policies if we're going to deliver for the British people writ large, both in terms of security, but also, importantly, I think, it's about having a population that is optimistic and is confident. And if people feel that their communities are under threat in whatever way because of housing developments that they've not had a voice in, or because of unmanaged or badly managed immigration, then they're not optimistic and confident.
Okay, just to conclude, I mean, UKIP, you say you got less than 2% of the vote at the last election. You've got no MPs. You've got control of no local councils. Your MEPs are about to lose their seats in 2019 and all that funding they get as members of the European Parliament. Big donors have disappeared, although there's a possibility that Aaron Banks might come back. He, of course, bankrolled the Leave.eu campaign and UKIP for many years under Nigel Farage's leadership. In terms of what you plan to achieve before the next general election, and I say this with no disrespect, Henry, but after 4 leaders in 18 months, we don't know whether you'll still be here in time for the next general election. I'm just simply going on the odds here. We may be interviewing another one in a few months' time. But realistically,
I fucked the odds once already.
This is true. What do you expect? What do you hope to achieve before the next election and at the next election?
No, well, first of all, as well as our MEPs, we've got 7 Welsh Assembly members, we've got 2 London Assembly members, and the reason, as we said earlier, for the low vote was not entirely because people didn't want to vote for us. We only stood in half of the seats, which was, as I said, a tactical error. So, first of all, I've got 2 major priorities, and they're broad strategic ones. One is to project the party firmly and decisively into the British political scene. And the present state of the Brexit negotiations is a very good entry point for us. It's our role. The second, we've got a moral obligation to be constructive in that debate. The second thing is to ensure that the party itself, its infrastructure, its systems, its structure itself is fit for purpose as a platform to make sure that effort is sustainable. And having spoken to a number of the donors, they're very keen that happens because they want to know that their money is well spent and spent efficiently. Same with members.
We should expect UKIP to be very much back on the national scene,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Henry Bolton
Absolutely.
to be a household name like Nigel Farage.
Absolutely. You're helping to make me one now.
Well,
we're talking here now.
we shall see. Henry Bolton, a new leader of UKIP, elected just last Friday. Thank you very much indeed for speaking to us here at Talk Radio.